Hello, and welcome to this lecture series within the Leading Self module of the People Management course. Today we're going to be discussing two very important topics called privilege and unconscious bias. As I've said again and again, knowing thyself and understanding who we are, what our blind spots are, what our shortcomings are, but also what our strengths and abilities are, help us to not only lead ourselves better, but lead those around us better. These two very important concepts are very pertinent to how we interact and engage with the world around us, but more importantly, how we deal with ourselves and how we then interact with others. Privilege, then, is defined as a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. Privilege is something we're often not even aware of. If we look at the race about to begin on the right-hand side, sometimes in life we aren't even aware of other people who are running a race close to us or within the same circles. But if we look at the image, we see that it's not always that everyone is at the same starting point within the race of life. Privilege then is further defined as a set of unearned benefits, advantages, or immunities that an individual or group receives based on certain aspects of their identity, such as race, gender, class, or sexual orientation. It often contributes to social inequality by providing advantages to some groups while disadvantaging others. As I said before, privilege is something we're often very unaware of. Examples of privilege include white privilege, which manifests as white individuals being less likely to experience racial profiling compared to a person of color. I'm sure many of us take for granted that we are able to walk and read and write and talk. As an able-bodied person, we very often don't look at or think of what a disabled person has to go through in life. These are just some examples of privilege, and the more aware and conscious we become of these, the more we realize that the way we engage and interact with the world is something that has an ability to either make or break any situation that we're in. If we look at the quote on the right, privilege is usually something invisible to the person that has it. It's only until it's pointed out to them or after they've lost their privilege that they realize what it was. In the case of the able-bodied person, as I said before, if we break our leg or have something happen to us or have a family member who goes through some sort of severe illness, it's only then that we often realize things that we take for granted and the privilege that we had as a result of that. Michael Kimmel, an American sociologist who specializes in the area of gender studies, further goes on to say that the privilege of privilege is that the terms of privilege are rendered invisible. It is a luxury not to have to think about race or class or gender. Only those marginalized by some category understand how powerful that category is when deployed against them. I want you to just take a moment and think about that. This week, as you are going to or about to go to your tutorial, you are going to have the opportunity to play a privilege game where we look at privileges and things that we may just take for granted. I want you to have a look at those two little images on the side there. We've got this race with men and women, and it shows how women are often very marginalized within life, within the workplace. If we look at the world, the way it's even designed, thinking of parenting, for instance, with parents now being very much in a co-parenting mode of men and women both looking at raising children, how often is it that you notice that a male bathroom has a moms and tots or a tots and dads changing room? How often is it when you go to a mall that you notice that the parking bay, is it usually for families and tots? More often than not, we see that it's for moms and tots, integrating yet again that women are the main person in a relationship who should be rearing a child. If we look at that little cartoon at the bottom right, You've got a man very sheepishly saying, "Quit whining. It's the same distance." If we look at the path that the woman has in front of her, as opposed to the male, becomes very clear then, this idea of privilege. The coin analogy of privilege is something that gives us a deeper understanding of how to understand this world of privilege. Professor Stephanie Nixon, if you watched the video that we have down there, just a short little video that I really encourage you to look at, only just a minute and a half, she talks about the coin analogy, where she explains that the coin itself represents the system of inequality. A coin, as we know, has two sides. She infers that the top part of a coin refers to the privilege, whereas the bottom part of the coin refers to oppression. The coin itself representing, as I said, the system of inequality, or the social structure that produces this inequality. If we look at the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you will then see that the system of inequality can be anything from classism to racism, settler colonialism, ableism, heterosexism, or sexism, and a wide variety of various other things. It's important in the world, we often just look at the side at the bottom, looking at people who are marginalized, LGBTQ community, your people of color, females, and we don't realize that the role that the people of privilege can play is very important in creating an equitable world. It's important to also note that each coin or each different system inequality is represented by a different coin. So ableism is its own coin, sexism is its own coin, racism is its own coin, and thereon. It's important then to realize that all these coins operate within the same environment and ecosystem within our global economy. And some people may have one or more, some people may appear to be at the top part of the privilege, in terms of being a possibly able-bodied person or a straight person or a male person. But then someone could also fall at the same time at the bottom part of the oppressive side of the coin. So you could be all of those things, but also lower class. And it's important to realize that these coins operate within the same environment, often at the same time. So what does that mean for people of privilege? There's a concept called allyship, which you were introduced to earlier through the videos and in your reflections. And I hope and really encourage you to really take these learnings to a deeper level, to really gain a deeper understanding of who you are and the world around you. Allyship then is defined as the lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, and accountability with marginalized individuals and or groups of people. Do you believe that people of privilege have a duty or responsibility to help those without? I want you to reflect on that question. There's something that you were given in your My Reflection section as well, and to think very deeply. If we look at the world around us and we allow these social inequities to exist and carry on into the future, what sort of world will we live in? Allyship then, or critical allyship, if you look at the coin analogy in further detail, there's also a journal article under the additional resources for your further reading that I really encourage you to read. There are some do's and don'ts of what you can do to become a critical ally if it's something that you do deeply believe in, which I highly encourage you to do. We then move on to the next section called unconscious bias. So how often is it that you don't even realize that you think or believe a certain thing or act in a certain way just based on the way someone looks or the way someone acts or the gender of the person? These are known as our unconscious bias. Our unconscious or implicit bias, as it's also known, is a learned assumption, belief, or attitude that exists in the subconscious that can involuntarily affect the way we think or act. This then has a huge influence on how we interact, not just with ourselves, but others as well. As future leaders and people who may be within the working world, you will be needed to make some very crucial decisions in a wide range of things, from hiring and firing to making very pertinent choices within the business or within your work environment or team environment. And these biases can play a huge part of how you make those decisions. Some of the biases that we may have or are not aware that we have could be affinity bias, where one shows a preference for people displaying the same characteristics as them. So we tend to be drawn to people who look like us or are like us or from the same culture or background as us. Attribution bias is where one refuses to understand that people might experience what they may experience, especially when they haven't experienced the same thing. A beauty bias talks for itself. It says that one forms their opinion based on how one looks. A confirmation bias refuses to acknowledge factors that do not match the initial impressions of that person. We talk about that we make an impression within the first 30 seconds of how we meet someone. Do you hold that bias for the rest of your life? Or do you allow that, as you gain further information about a person, to become a more informed opinion of who and what that person is? If we look at the various other forms of biases, there's conformity bias, gender bias, halo and horns bias. All of these things inform us as leaders, as decision makers, and play an important role of how we engage, not with just ourselves, but those around us as well. I encourage you to watch this video by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She talks about the single story and the danger of having the single story that are often based on generalizations of individuals, groups, or country. The single story refers to this often oversimplified view of the world, especially with people that are different to us, resulting in stereotypes or, as I said, generalization. A stereotype is a belief about an individual based on the real or imagined characteristics of a group to which that individual belongs, which can often lead us to judge an individual or group negatively. It's in reflecting and understanding these stereotypes and the links to prejudice and discrimination that we uncover our own biases. Again, as I say again and again, by knowing these things and becoming more conscious of these, we then become more emotionally aware and intelligent in how we manage and lead ourselves and those around us. So as Chimamanda says, the single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. The consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how different we are rather than how similar. I want you to take a moment and just reflect on yourself. How often have you done this? How often do you do this? And what can you do about this to make sure that going forward, that you become more aware and conscious of disempowering the power of the single story? So I'm going to end off this lecture series by giving you a lovely tool that will be able to help you and your team develop better self-awareness of your conscious and unconscious bias. This framework is called Johari's Window, developed by two gentlemen, Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham, which is why it's called Johari's Window. This tool is also able to help you understand your own strengths and weaknesses, as well as comparing them to how other people perceive you. This tool can also help to build trust and improve understanding and interpersonal relationships within a team, as well as a work environment. If we look at the tool on the right-hand side, we see that it's broken up into 4 quadrants. The first area is known as the open area. These are elements of things that are known by the self and also known by others. If we go then to area number 2, called the blind area, these are things that are known by others but unknown by ourselves. So maybe, for instance, we have a really low sense of self-esteem. We may not know that within ourselves, but other people around us may be able to see that. If we look at area number 3, this is known as the hidden area. So this is where things are unknown by others, but known by the self. So maybe I know that I am homosexual, and I'm a bit scared to disclose that. So not yet known to others, it's something that's still hidden. If we look at area 4, These are elements within ourselves that are unknown by ourselves and unknown by others. The idea of this model is that the more aware we become of ourselves and our blind spots or unconscious biases, the more we're able to develop who we are as people. The more we fill within the open area, the more we reduce the other areas where we are unaware of who and what we are. As I say again and again, it's only in knowing ourselves and being true to who we are that we can truly become the best versions of ourselves, to be the best leaders we can be of self, as well as, if it is part of your goal of the future, to lead others as well. I thank you for spending this time with me during this lecture. I hope you've learned something about yourself and are able to look at yourself and ask these very important questions that, as I say again and again, help you not only to know yourself better, but to be able to lead self and thereby lead others and those around you. Thank you.